Fortuna. But Uratir Dragonslayer was conceived when Allfather Dios still had the fire of life in him, before his destruction by the Prince of Beasts and making anew by Great Cabera. For this reason, Uratir is first among the children of Dios and Cabera and lord over the sky by right of birth. From St. Martial's First Moonin, chapter 6, verse 14, in The Lion and the Grips. They brought him in on a board. Fortuna was seated on the throne when it happened, reading a scroll to themselves when 6 came in, carrying a 7th. What happened? Fortuna rose, only to see Irel's body lashed to the wood. Lucian, Cecil, Rubifer, and Julianus carried him, silent and stone-faced. Kellon, protect me. For a moment Fortuna saw him dead, until his limbs twitched in a way they hadn't seen in many long years. The 6 of them passed Fortuna without a word, and began to march grimly up the stairs. Wait! Fortuna grabbed Lucian's shoulder, only for him to snap around, eyes aflame. Don't. His voice was quiet in that way it was when he was trying not to lose control. Without another word, he and Irel were gone. Don't. The word echoed in Fortuna's mind. Don't. By the time Fortuna reached Irel's room, he had already been placed onto the bed, and from the room's edge, Fortuna's eyes finally dared to see what had happened. The right half of his face was a mess of hair, pine needles, and blood. The only land in that sea of filth, a broken shaft where his right eye should have been. Bubbles of blood swelled and popped atop his lips, each a soundless word. Sprawled on the bed and covered in dirt, Fortuna thought he looked more unfired clay than flesh. Slowly his twitching stopped and Fortuna feared the worst. Out of my way! Preston raced up the stairs. He entered the room and gasped, By the Heron! Irel! Get out! All of you! His expression steeled, and from a pocket in his robe he pulled a pair of bronze tweezers. I have work to do. You heard him. Lucian murmured from the side of Irel's bed. Go! Edmund, egg in hand, and the guards looked at each other. Go! Rubifer! Brother Preston ordered as the others departed. Fetch me vinegar, the rest of my surgery tools, and some valerian extract. Dried Hyoscamus too, while you're at it. Irel moaned softly. Lucian looked up, tears in his eyes. Will he live? Brother Preston paused for a moment, turning the words over in his mind. Yes, he said finally. Lucian then turned and saw Fortuna still in the room. His eyes met Fortuna's, and when they did, Fortuna saw nothing of the man they knew. Holding back tears, Fortuna fled down the stairs, only to find Edmund and Eggenhand chatting below. What happened? Fortuna grabbed Edmund by the collar. Answer me! Get your hands off me! Edmund yelled back, knocking Fortuna's vambraced wrist away. They could have slapped him. You will know, Eggenhand turned to Fortuna calmly, that under any other circumstance, with any other person, that would have cost you your hand. Fortuna clenched their fist, feeling the tendons pull against bone. What happened? Edmund couldn't meet their gaze. We found him only a little bit later. Each of us, we each had, it could have been me. A hunt, Eggenhand clarified. A stray arrow. We know not who did it. A hunt? Nail dug against flesh as Fortuna clenched their hand harder. I see. And so shall he, Eggenhand replied. In one eye, at least. Let it be your solace that I know I was not the one who let the shaft fly. If your highness would not mind, Fortuna replied icily. I have a mandate to govern while my liege is occupied. As you wish, Detian O'Whisker. Eggenhand bowed and carried him and his charge from the hall. Fortuna returned to the throne, the seat now cold, and read their scroll as they waited for petitioners which never came. Despite trying to focus on the words of history and inheritance before them, Fortuna's mind kept spiraling back to Irel, to Lucian, and the tears that had been on his face. Fortuna. Preston was standing over them now, a fine sheen of sweat on his brow. It is done. Done? Fortuna echoed. You don't mean... Preston sniffled. He's alive, and will be for many years, if the gods are good and I have done my art with care. Fortuna looked around, noticing that somehow midday had already come. What did you do to him? Preston extended his soft fingers and began to count. I sliced the arrowhead from his eye, and then put him to sleep so he wouldn't hurt as much. Once the Hyoscamus took hold, I removed the rest of the damaged flesh, washed the wound in warm vinegar, and sealed it shut with hot bronze. Then I stuffed the cavity full of linen and wrapped his head in it. By the time I was done, he looked almost like a bride. And Lucian? Preston sniffled. See for yourself. Fortuna tried not to run. Before they could, though, Preston grasped them on the shoulder. A moment, Preston whispered, pulling Fortuna's ear close. You don't think it's strange? Think what's strange? Fortuna turned to face them. Preston's rheumy eyes narrowed. The Empire's third prince shows up unannounced and recruits our lord for something. Most likely some task in the capital which requires an outsider's eye. Not only that, but his retainer, a member of the Red Gold no less, is a man without name or clan or even a definite line of work. And yet this man fortuitously finds the Lord's brother returned and does to him as the prince did to his brother. Fortuna nodded. I noticed it too. What's more, this Egenhand permits his prince to ride in short company. Hunting, no less. An assassin could not have wished for better. And behold, an accident occurs. But not for the prince. Preston pulled Fortuna closer. I'd be of a mind that the arrow was meant for the older brother, so the younger might take his place in the south. Or perhaps this Egenhand is an impostor, a cutthroat who hides his true face through unnatural sorcery, and the prince was indeed the target. But then why let him live? Guard them day and night, for I fear the counselor's work is yet done. Preston? Fortuna strained to connect what he said. What are you even talking about? A thought. That's all. Preston let his arm fall. You should go. Fortuna went on their way, no less uneasy than they had been. Above, Lucian had hardly moved from his spot. Whereas before his eyes held naught but wrath, now they didn't even hold tears. He was sitting beside the bed, Irel's hand in his. He hadn't even changed from his hunting garb, still smelling of the forest, of sweat, and of blood. Sitting there, he looked small, just a man against a large, uncaring world. If Lucian was just a man, Irel was half a corpse. Laid out on the bed, swaddled in blankets and bandages, he seemed an ancient king in the process of being embalmed. He wore a linen diadem stained with sweat, covering the place where his right eye should have been. At a glance he seemed peaceful until a split lip and scratched cheeks tensed at unseen pains. Something filled Fortuna then, an emotion they did not expect. It was regret. Fortuna's armor clinked slightly as they pulled a chair next to Lucian. Will he live? They asked softly. Preston thinks so, Lucian said without looking up. Fortuna nodded, unsure of what to say. We were out riding in Erin's wood, Lucian went on. Me, Irel, Edmund, and his retainer. All was well until a swarm of pigeons suddenly descended on us, and Edmund demanded we shoot them. The look on his face when he took the first one he had downed and snapped his neck. We all had to join in, but Irel went off on his own. We found him a couple minutes later. After the swarm flew so low we were practically shooting through the forest than in it. He left the rest unsaid. Fortuna put a hand on Lucian's shoulder, but when they did it twitched, recoiling against their touch. It hurt more than one of Sir Miles' blows. Even if it was true, Fortuna tried to say, it wasn't your fault. How? Lucian's reply was a sharp cough. Tell me. Fortuna tried, but nothing came. Tell me! They couldn't. What was there to say? Whether it had been him or not, the end was the same. While the temple's priests or sibyls of the deep wilds had been known to occasionally restore sight to the blind or strength to the feeble, none in the known world could restore a lost eye. How long has he been resting? Fortuna finally asked. The better part of 2 hours. As he talked, Lucian began to look less destroyed. Preston gave him valerian root to help him sleep, and hyoscamus to make whatever thing caused his attacks to let him go. With the amount he gave, Preston doesn't expect him to wake until a day from now, by which time I will be gone. Fortuna felt numb. What? They said it slowly, again feeling like everything they had built was beginning to unravel. You heard me, Lucian snapped. Tomorrow Edmund and I ride for Fair Calais. How? Fortuna exclaimed. You can't. You're needed here. I need you here, they wanted to add. I can't do this without you. But if Lucian was willing to leave, and so easily at that, what did that say about them? Their work? What were they even doing? Why not? Lucian retorted. What have I done that you and Canta can't in my stead? I am needed south. The prince, damn the wretch he has become, demands it. Because, Fortuna shook, when 2 years ago you first sat your father's throne, we together swore to leave a better Erdonia than the one we found. I remember, Lucian grimaced. We each threw a stone into Cassius' gorge, the dying sun as our witness. Why else do you think I delayed? Hesitant to bequeath this land to a sister I fear my lesser. And for that the gods took Irel's eye. All those judgments, all that meting justice, and I still couldn't save him. The gods humbled me, just as they humbled me after that first time I sent a man down to die in Dios' twilight halls. You remember, don't you? How you held me through that night, whispering that I had done the right thing. Fortuna nodded. I do. It had happened only a turn of the red moon into Lucian's tenure, a crime of passion and hate. Lucian tried to hide his tears. Guide her as you guided me. Maybe she will better bear the blood that comes to her hands. When I'm gone, you can finish the work we started. But now, to avoid further tragedy, I must go. Lucian. Fortuna clasped their hand over his, hoping to make him see. I know. Fortuna and Lucian looked at each other. Neither of them had spoken. No, Irel mumbled again. The daughter. They have it. My eyes. Irel's eye, dark as black tourmaline, snapped open. He sat up at once, the dead king risen, a hand on his left wrist. Sammy. He was breathing heavily. They have my eyes, just as they said. Hearing those words, Fortuna shuddered. Whatever was speaking, it wasn't Irel. The man's expression then changed as his dark eye turned to Lucian. I know this is what you wanted, Gaster. The thing gasped. But please, I beg you reconsider. A few more years and I'll have another, one untainted. Irel. Lucian's expression was horror. What are you saying? Untainted. Irel repeated, softer now. He sank back into his bed, a hand near his neck. She has my eyes. As if nothing had happened, Irel fell back asleep, if he had ever truly woken. Fortuna just sat there, not knowing what to say. Anathema befall us, Lucian whispered. What was that? Fortuna turned to him. What was he talking about? Who are Sammy and Castor? Was the god still with him? I... Lucian's gaze snapped to something around Irel's neck. It was a leather cord. No. Lucian pried it from Irel's neck. You're not his medallion. Woven into a leather harness from Lucian's grasp dangled an amulet the size of a small apricot, though in the light Fortuna could not say if it were glass or polished stone. It was dark regardless, dark as the sea or the deepest earth. Its surface was smooth, perfect, save for a jagged white line that made the entire thing look like some beast's eye. Is it you, then, the cause of my brother's sickness, whose eye has afflicted you upon him? He handed it to Fortuna. What do you make of it? It seems familiar. Fortuna weighed it as something crept into their mind. But realization struck Fortuna and they dropped the thing onto the rug. What is it? Irel. They turned to him. How long have you... Fortuna! The care had gone from Lucian's voice. Where did you see it? Nowhere, Fortuna insisted. It's just... Do I tell him? Just what? Just... Fortuna stammered. It was 5 years ago. Before he left. He made a fuss about not being seen without having a moment first. Being seen? Lucian hissed. What do you... Oh! Fortuna left the rest unsaid. 5 years, then, Lucian said slowly as he picked the amulet off the rug. At least, Fortuna corrected. At least, Lucian echoed. And he hadn't had any attacks for years by the time he left. So it wasn't this then. Then what invited the god? Fortuna replied. Something he ate? The shock of the wound? Lucian fingered the amulet. Preston did feed him hyoscamus. Maybe it could have bestowed such a madness. Lucian shook his head, his mouth twisted. I'm sorry, Fortuna. I need to ask. How many people know? What? Fortuna's gaze narrowed. Why do you care? I thought it wouldn't matter to you. Not to me, Lucian insisted. To others. You're still unwed. For them to think you're... To think I'm what? Fortuna yelled as their fears finally bubbled forth. Tainted? Is that what matters to you? I don't care if the Whiskers die with me, or did you just think I was playing at making Erdonia a better place these past 2 years? Maybe you were, seeing how easily you're giving it all away to the likes of Kanta. You think this is easy for me? It was Lucian's turn to yell. You don't think I'd rather it be Irel? Lucian jabbed a finger at him. I don't even know if he'll live, much less if the person who wakes will even be the brother I knew. Of course this matters to me. Lucian wheezed slightly. He was about to cry. That's why I need you, Fortuna, he whispered. To carry on after I'm gone. To help one brother where I couldn't the other. Because I am called south, and I must answer. They were silent for a time. Fortuna put a hand on his cheek, then slid it to his shoulder. I know, they replied. No one knows, they answered after a time. Nothing came of it. Nothing. It means nothing. Lucian opened his mouth, but before he could speak, footsteps began echoing up the stairwell. At once, Lucian scooped up the amulet and hid it in the folds of his tunic. Not a word. His onyx eyes were full of apprehension. Before Fortuna could respond, Meg burst into the room, her twin raven-black braids swaying as she went. We came as soon as we heard! Meg's eyes settled on Irel. Oh, Irel, it's nearly as horrible as I could have imagined. Will he live? He lives. Hidden behind the bed frame, Fortuna saw Lucian's hand curl into a fist. Hopefully he'll awake before tomorrow's night, unaffected save for the loss of his eye. Oh, Irel! Meg drew close to the bed, but before she could touch him, the other footsteps ended. Canta stood at the chamber's precipice, eyes like black tourmaline fixed on her brother. For several moments she just stood there, a statue, until the stone finally spoke. I see. Look, Canta! Meg cradled Irel's head in her hands. Isn't it terrible? She kissed his forehead. Canta walked over and languidly ran some of Irel's hair between her fingers. His linens need changing, she announced. It seems his wound has reopened. Indeed, some of Irel's bandages were now darkening. Lucian saw too, at once reaching for his brother's head. Move your hands, Lucian ordered, to which Meg quickly answered. I need a drink. Canta turned from Irel only to then spot the clay lagunos atop Irel's desk. Canta smirked but a moment, yet to Fortuna it seemed worse than if she had laughed. Canta drifted over to it, poured herself a measure of the thick liquid, and drank. Ugh. Canta spat it out before half the cup was drained. How disgusting. And to believe my brother drinks the swill. Who does he think himself? Leomedon the Pure? She took another sip. I suppose it's for the best then. She turned back to the others, cup in hand. The gods may know our fates, and play us as we play games. But that doesn't mean we can't see their designs. What are you getting at, Canta? Fortuna asked warily. Canta took another sip of the wine and frowned. I doubt that after this I will have any interest in our brother's seat once he's gone. It will have to fall to me then. How? Lucian's eyes went wide. How did you? Canta shrugged. As I said, it's easy enough to find out things in this castle, and you've spent half the day in this room. Think of it, Fortuna. She turned to them. You and Meg as my advisors, and I the liege lady of all Ordonia. Fortuna wanted to vomit. I. Fortuna wobbled to their feet. Yes. That sounds... Are you feeling all right? Meg stepped forward. I feel fine, Fortuna stammered. I just remembered there's something I need to take care of. Before anyone could respond, Fortuna raced down the stairwell, boots ringing as they went. 2 minutes later they were in the training yard, where an axe and pile of firewood waited. Fortuna placed a log onto the block, raised the axe, and smashed it down into the wood. The axe rose, and they did it again, then again, then again. All the while the sound of chopping wood masked their tears.